Dexter Morgan, the blood spatter analyst with a dark secret, captivated audiences as a vigilante serial killer who hunted other killers. Throughout the series Dexter, his double life was a closely guarded secret, but a select few either discovered or suspected the truth about him. In this video, we'll delve into the characters who uncovered Dexter's murderous alter ego and how they reacted, exploring the consequences of their discoveries in this gripping and morally complex tale. Harry Morgan, Dexter's adoptive father, was the first to recognize the disturbing truth about Dexter's nature. As a Miami police officer, Harry was no stranger to violence, crime, and the darker side of humanity. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the chilling discovery of what lurked inside his own son. From an early age, Harry noticed peculiar signs in Dexter: his detachment from others, an eerie lack of empathy, and, most troubling of all, a growing fascination with death. When Dexter's proclivities escalated to killing neighborhood animals, Harry realized he was dealing with something beyond the scope of normal childhood mischief. Confronted with the enormity of the situation, Harry faced a moral and emotional dilemma. How could he, as a father, protect both Dexter and the world from the monster he seemed destined to become? For most parents, the instinct to shield their child from harm or judgment would be paramount. But in Dexter's case, Harry knew that protection wasn't enough. If left unchecked, Dexter's darkness could lead to horrific consequences. Instead of attempting to suppress or punish Dexter's urges, Harry made the controversial decision to harness them. Drawing on his police experience, Harry developed what would become known as the Code, a strict set of rules to direct Dexter's violent tendencies toward killing only those who deserved it. The Code provided structure, a moral justification of sorts, and a purpose to Dexter's compulsions. Harry taught Dexter to channel his urges for the greater good by targeting murderers, rapists, and other criminals who had evaded justice. The idea was to turn Dexter into a vigilante rather than a threat to innocent people. Harry's decision, while pragmatic, was not without emotional cost. The more he trained Dexter, the more he grappled with guilt over enabling his son to become a killer, even if Dexter's victims were themselves killers. There was a moment when Harry, perhaps naively, believed that the Code might help Dexter control his darker urges completely. But as the years passed, he began to understand the true magnitude of what he had unleashed. Dexter wasn't just following the Code out of a sense of justice. He genuinely craved the act of killing. The blood, the control, the release. It was part of who Dexter was, and Harry had come to accept that there was no way to erase that part of him. Harry's feelings of guilt and failure came to a head when he witnessed firsthand the depth of Dexter's detachment. In a flashback shown later in the series, Harry observed Dexter dismembering a body with chilling efficiency, as though it were a routine task. For Harry, this was a turning point. He realized that while the Code had given Dexter a means to function in society, it had not made him any less of a monster. Harry began to question his role in creating and nurturing that monster. Was it right to help Dexter justify his murders, even if his victims were criminals? Or had Harry simply become complicit in Dexter's killings, using the guise of morality to ease his own conscience? These doubts eventually consumed Harry, and his deteriorating mental state led to his death. Although it was officially labeled a heart attack, the series suggests that Harry's guilt over his role in Dexter's life was a contributing factor. His death became a pivotal moment for Dexter, who continued to honor the Code as a way to both fulfill his compulsions and maintain a connection to his father's teachings. Harry's influence looms large throughout the series, not only through Dexter's adherence to the Code, but also through the recurring presence of Harry's voice as a manifestation of Dexter's conscience. Even after death, Harry acts as a moral compass of sorts, guiding Dexter and reminding him of the principles behind the Code. Yet, as the series progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that Harry's teachings were both a gift and a curse. While they gave Dexter a way to function in society, they also trapped him in a cycle of secrecy, isolation, and violence. Harry's legacy is a complex one. On one hand, his intervention likely prevented Dexter from becoming a chaotic and indiscriminate killer. On the other, he helped create a man who lived a double life, one foot in the world of justice and the other firmly in the shadow of death. Dexter often reflects on Harry's actions with a mixture of gratitude and resentment. He acknowledges that without Harry, he might have been caught or killed long ago, but he also wonders what his life might have been if his father had chosen a different path, if Harry had tried to fix him rather than train him to kill. In the end, Harry's role in Dexter's life serves as a reminder of the ethical complexities and unintended consequences of trying to control the uncontrollable. Harry's love for Dexter was genuine, but his methods left scars that would shape Dexter's life forever. The creation of the code was Harry's way of managing the impossible, but it also condemned Dexter to a life of isolation, torn between his human facade and the monster within. Deborah Morgan's journey toward discovering Dexter's true nature is one of the most emotionally devastating arcs in the series. As Dexter's adoptive sister, Deborah grew up idolizing her big brother. She saw him as her rock, her protector, and the one constant in her often chaotic life. Their bond was forged through shared childhood experiences and the absence of their mother, making Dexter a central figure in Deborah's world. Yet this close relationship was built on a foundation of lies, as Dexter carefully concealed his darkest secret from her. Deborah's life was already marked by emotional struggles. Her deep-seated insecurities, stemming from her need to prove herself in a male-dominated profession and gain her father Harry's approval, created a relentless drive in her to succeed as a police officer. Her career and her relationships with others often took a back seat to her need for validation. Dexter, in many ways, was her anchor. She leaned on him for support and trusted him implicitly, never suspecting that the man she relied on was living a double life as a vigilante serial killer. The first cracks in their relationship appeared when Deborah became involved in cases that intersected with Dexter's secret activities. Unknowingly, Deborah frequently came close to uncovering the truth, whether it was through her investigation of the ice truck killer, later revealed to be Dexter's biological brother Brian, or her pursuit of the Bay Harbor butcher, Dexter's alter ego. Each time, Dexter expertly manipulated the situation to steer her away from the truth, protecting both himself and their bond. These close calls only deepened the tragedy of Deborah's eventual discovery. Deborah's world began to unravel when she walked in on Dexter killing Travis Marshall, the Doomsday Killer, in the season 6 finale. This shocking revelation shattered the image of her brother that she had held onto her entire life. Dexter's meticulously constructed facade came crashing down in an instant, leaving Deborah reeling from the betrayal. Her first reaction was disbelief. The man she loved and trusted most in the world couldn't possibly be capable of such an act, could he? But the evidence was undeniable. Dexter had a darkness she had never suspected. The aftermath of Deborah's discovery was devastating for both characters. For Deborah, the realization that her brother was a killer triggered a profound identity crisis. She was torn between her loyalty to Dexter and her duties as a police officer. Her entire moral framework was thrown into question. How could she uphold the law while protecting someone who so blatantly violated it? Deborah's internal conflict became a central theme of the series, as she struggled to reconcile her love for Dexter with the horrifying reality of his actions. Dexter, for his part, was forced to confront the possibility of losing the one person who truly loved him unconditionally. He had always feared what would happen if Deborah discovered the truth, and now that fear had become reality. Yet, instead of running or attempting to manipulate her as he had with others, Dexter was honest with Deborah in a way he had never been before. He explained the code, his need to kill, and his belief that he was doing something necessary by eliminating people who deserved to die. While this honesty didn't absolve Dexter of his actions, it added complexity to their relationship, as Deborah began to understand the twisted logic behind his behavior. Deborah's emotional turmoil reached its peak when she was faced with an impossible choice. Should she turn Dexter in, or should she protect him? Ultimately, she chose the latter, driven by her love for him and her inability to imagine a world where he wasn't in her life. This decision marked a turning point for Deborah. By covering for Dexter, she compromised her own morals and became complicit in his crimes. It was a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. As the series progressed, Deborah's mental and emotional state deteriorated under the weight of her secret. She turned to therapy, substance abuse, and destructive behavior in an attempt to cope with the unbearable guilt of aiding Dexter. Her once bright personality became increasingly dark and unstable, mirroring the emotional toll of living in Dexter's shadow. Her downward spiral was made even worse by her complicated feelings for Dexter. In one of the show's most controversial twists, Deborah admitted to having romantic feelings for her brother, a revelation that added another layer of psychological complexity to her character. Despite her internal struggles, Deborah remained fiercely protective of Dexter, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness and career. She became enmeshed in his world, covering up his crimes and helping him evade capture. This toxic dynamic ultimately consumed her, as the weight of Dexter's secret proved too much to bear. In the end, Deborah's love for Dexter led to her tragic downfall. The culmination of their story is perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of the series. After Deborah is critically injured during Dexter's final attempts to leave his life as a killer behind, Dexter is forced to confront the full extent of the damage he has caused. Deborah's death, both literal and symbolic, represents the ultimate consequence of Dexter's double life. It is a devastating reminder that even the most unbreakable bonds can be shattered by the weight of truth and betrayal. Deborah Morgan's discovery of Dexter's secret was more than just a plot twist. It was the emotional core of the series. Her journey from innocent sister to tortured accomplice encapsulated the show's central themes of love, loyalty, and the moral ambiguity of justice. Deborah's tragic arc serves as a powerful reminder of the collateral damage caused by Dexter's actions, leaving viewers to question whether his vigilante code was ever truly worth the cost. Detective James Dokes, one of Miami Metro's finest, was the first to see through Dexter Morgan's carefully constructed facade. Unlike Dexter's other colleagues, who saw him as a quirky yet harmless blood spatter analyst, Dokes instinctively sensed something darker lurking beneath Dexter's surface. From the moment they met, Dokes was openly suspicious of Dexter. While others at Miami Metro appreciated Dexter's morbid sense of humor and uncanny knack for crime scene analysis, Dokes found him unsettling. His blunt, no-nonsense demeanor clashed with Dexter's seemingly mild-mannered personality, setting the stage for one of the series' most intense rivalries. Dokes' suspicions stemmed from his experience as a former Special Forces operative and seasoned detective. His gut instincts, honed through years of dealing with dangerous criminals, told him that Dexter wasn't what he appeared to be. While most people at the precinct were charmed by Dexter's helpful nature and polite demeanor, Dokes saw through the act. He frequently referred to Dexter as creepy, and wasn't shy about expressing his dislike. Dokes' disdain for Dexter wasn't just a personality clash. It was the result of a growing conviction that something was deeply wrong with the blood spatter analyst. As the series progressed, Dokes' suspicions intensified. His turning point came during the investigation into the Bay Harbor butcher, a serial killer who was targeting Miami's most notorious criminals. Unbeknownst to the police, Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher, using his position at Miami Metro to stay one step ahead of the investigation. While his colleagues worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence, Dexter manipulated the crime scenes and planted misleading clues to keep the investigation off his trail. Dokes, however, wasn't so easily deceived. His dogged determination to uncover the truth led him to notice inconsistencies in Dexter's behavior. Why was Dexter always so calm and detached, even when faced with grisly murder scenes? Why did he seem to have an uncanny understanding of killers and their methods? These questions gnawed at Dokes, fueling his determination to expose Dexter for who he really was. The tension between Dokes and Dexter reached a boiling point when Dokes began following Dexter outside of work. His surveillance brought him closer and closer to the truth, leading to several near misses where he almost caught Dexter in the act. Dexter, aware of Dokes' scrutiny, was forced to become even more cautious, heightening the suspense and stakes of their cat and mouse game. Dokes' relentless pursuit was a stark contrast to the obliviousness of Dexter's other colleagues, making him a formidable adversary. The pivotal moment in their conflict occurred when Dokes discovered Dexter's blood slide collection, a trophy box containing slides of blood from each of Dexter's victims. This discovery confirmed Dokes' worst fears. Dexter wasn't just strange or creepy, he was a serial killer. Armed with this knowledge, Dokes confronted Dexter, but his attempt to bring him to justice backfired. Dexter, ever resourceful, managed to frame Dokes as the Bay Harbor Butcher by planting evidence that pointed to him as the killer. Dexter's manipulation was a masterclass in psychological warfare, exploiting Dokes' aggressive personality and past history to make the frame-up believable. Dokes' downfall was as tragic as it was inevitable. Despite his honorable intentions and unwavering commitment to justice, he found himself outmaneuvered by Dexter at every turn. Dexter's ability to manipulate people and situations to his advantage left Dokes isolated and powerless. Even his colleagues, who respected Dokes' skills as a detective, began to doubt him as the evidence against him piled up. The man who had spent his life fighting for justice was now branded a murderer, his reputation destroyed. The culmination of their rivalry came when Dexter captured Dokes and held him prisoner in a remote cabin. For Dexter, this was a rare moment of vulnerability. Dokes' discovery of his secret forced Dexter to confront the possibility of his carefully constructed double life unraveling. Yet, even in captivity, Dokes refused to back down. His defiance and refusal to compromise his principles made him one of the few characters who truly stood up to Dexter, exposing the cracks in Dexter's moral code. In a cruel twist of fate, Dokes' life came to an end, not at Dexter's hands, but at the hands of Lila, Dexter's unhinged lover. Fearing that Dokes' continued existence posed a threat to Dexter, Lila set the cabin on fire with Dokes inside, killing him and ensuring Dexter's secret remained safe. Dokes' death was a devastating loss, not only because of his moral integrity, but also because he represented a rare challenge to Dexter's dominance. With Dokes gone, Dexter's dark world remained intact, but the cost of maintaining it became increasingly heavy. Dokes' role in the series was more than that of an antagonist. He was a moral counterbalance to Dexter. While Dexter rationalized his killings through the code, Dokes embodied a more traditional sense of justice. His unwavering belief in doing what was right, even at great personal risk, made him a compelling and tragic figure. In many ways, Dokes was the closest thing the series had to a true hero. A man who saw evil for what it was, and tried to stop it regardless of the consequences. Even after his death, Dokes' presence lingered in the series. The fallout from his murder and Dexter's framing of him as the Bay Harbor Butcher continued to shape the narrative. serving as a reminder of the devastating consequences of Dexter's actions. Dokes's legacy was one of courage and integrity, a stark contrast to Dexter's calculated and self-serving morality. In the end, Dokes's story is a testament to the dangers of seeing the truth in a world that prefers to look the other way. His unwavering pursuit of justice cost him everything, but it also exposed the fragility of Dexter's carefully constructed life. Dokes's determination and ultimate sacrifice added depth and complexity to the series, leaving an indelible mark on both the story and the viewers who watched it unfold. Lila Tourney and Hannah McKay, two of Dexter Morgan's most pivotal romantic partners, played unique roles in his story as women who not only discovered his secret, but also accepted it. Each of them represents a different facet of Dexter's life and psyche, offering contrasting dynamics and consequences that shaped his character and choices. Lila Tourney enters Dexter's life during a tumultuous period, shortly after his breakup with Rita. As his Narcotics Anonymous sponsor, Lila is immediately drawn to Dexter's darkness, sensing the storm beneath his calm exterior. Lila, herself deeply unstable and manipulative, is a pyromaniac with a history of destructive behavior. Unlike Rita, who sees Dexter as a normal, kind-hearted man, Lila embraces and even romanticizes his darker side. Her attraction to Dexter stems from her own chaotic nature. She perceives him as someone who, like her, exists outside the boundaries of societal norms. Lila's discovery of Dexter's true nature unfolds gradually. She is intrigued by his emotional detachment and begins to pry into his life, pushing boundaries in ways that make him both uneasy and fascinated. Dexter, in turn, is drawn to Lila because she offers him an escape from the constraints of his normal life. She represents freedom from the code, from his guilt, and from the effort of maintaining his facade. When Lila eventually learns about Dexter's violent side, she doesn't recoil in horror as others might. Instead, she is exhilarated. To Lila, Dexter's killings are not monstrous, but an extension of the darkness she admires in him. Her reaction is one of fascination, even infatuation, as she sees Dexter's darkness as a mirror to her own. However, Lila's acceptance of Dexter is not without its complications. Her willingness to embrace his true self is not driven by love or understanding, but by her desire to control him. Lila uses her knowledge of Dexter's secret to manipulate him, attempting to sever his ties with Rita and isolate him from everyone else in his life. She thrives on chaos and destruction, and her relationship with Dexter becomes increasingly toxic as she tries to pull him further into her world. This culminates in Lila becoming a direct threat to Dexter's life and the lives of those he cares about. Her obsession ultimately leads to her downfall, as Dexter is forced to kill her to protect himself and his loved ones. While Lila's relationship with Dexter is built on manipulation and shared darkness, Hannah McKay's connection to him is more complex. Hannah enters Dexter's life as a suspect in a series of murders. A former accomplice to a spree killer, Hannah has a violent past of her own, but she has since moved on and started a new life. Dexter initially approaches her as a potential victim, someone who fits the code. However, as he learns more about her, he begins to see her as a kindred spirit, someone who understands his darkness because she shares it. Hannah is unique among Dexter's romantic partners in that she doesn't shy away from the truth of who he is. When she discovers his secret, she doesn't see him as a monster or a hero. She sees him as a man, flawed and complicated, much like herself. Unlike Lila, Hannah does not try to manipulate Dexter or exploit his secret for her own gain. Instead, she offers him something he has rarely experienced: unconditional acceptance. For Dexter, who has spent his entire life hiding his true self, this is both liberating and terrifying. Their relationship is marked by a deep sense of mutual understanding, Hannah doesn't judge Dexter for his actions, nor does she try to change him. She accepts him as he is, darkness and all, because she knows what it's like to live with a violent past. In many ways, Hannah represents the possibility of a life where Dexter doesn't have to hide. With her, he can be honest about who he is without fear of rejection. This dynamic sets their relationship apart from any other Dexter has had. However, their love is not without challenges. Hannah's own violent tendencies and criminal past put her at odds with Dexter's code. While Dexter justifies his actions through a moral framework, Hannah's killings are often driven by passion or self-preservation. This difference creates tension between them, as Dexter struggles to reconcile his feelings for her with his belief in the code. Despite this, their bond grows stronger, and Dexter begins to entertain the idea of a future with her, a life free from his obligations to the code and his need to kill. Hannah's presence in Dexter's life forces him to confront questions he has long avoided. Can he truly leave his dark passenger behind? Is it possible for him to live a normal life with someone who accepts him for who he is? These questions become central to Dexter's journey as he grapples with his desire for connection and his fear of losing control. Their relationship takes a tragic turn when external forces threaten to tear them apart. Dexter's colleagues at Miami Metro, particularly Deborah, view Hannah as a dangerous criminal who cannot be trusted. This creates a rift between Dexter and Deborah, whose already strained relationship is further tested by his love for Hannah. Despite these obstacles, Dexter remains committed to protecting Hannah, even at great personal cost. In the end, Hannah's relationship with Dexter represents both his greatest hope and his greatest vulnerability. With her, he glimpses the possibility of a life where he can be his true self, free from the constraints of the code and the lies he has built around him. Yet this same vulnerability exposes him to danger, as his love for Hannah blinds him to the risks of trusting someone with his secret. Lila and Hannah, though vastly different, serve as mirrors to Dexter's own complexities. Lila embodies the destructive potential of his darkness, showing him the chaos that can arise when he loses control. Hannah, on the other hand, offers him a glimpse of redemption, a chance to live authentically without fear or shame. Together, these relationships reveal the duality of Dexter's nature and the constant tension between his need for connection and his need to kill. Their stories underscore the central question of the series. Can someone like Dexter ever truly find love and redemption, or is he destined to remain isolated by his darkness? As Dexter Morgan's life unfolded, the careful balance he maintained between his public persona as a blood spatter analyst and his secret life as a serial killer grew increasingly fragile. While he had meticulously crafted his double life and adhered to the code instilled in him by Harry, the danger of exposure was always present. Over the years, a series of incidents brought him dangerously close to having his dark truth revealed, each moment heightening the tension and testing Dexter's ability to stay one step ahead of those who sought to uncover his secret. From the beginning, Dexter's methodical approach to his kills was his greatest shield. The code demanded precision, no unnecessary risks, no evidence left behind, and only targeting those who deserved it. Yet, despite his adherence to these rules, the very nature of his activities made it inevitable that people would stumble upon his secret. These moments began as close calls, slight errors that could have unraveled his life if not for Dexter's quick thinking and resourcefulness. One of the earliest brushes with exposure came during the ice truck killer investigation. Dexter's fascination with the case and his strange connection to the killer drew attention from his colleagues, particularly Detective James Dokes. While others chalked up Dexter's obsession to his peculiar personality, Dokes became suspicious. The Ice Truck Killer's games, which seemed tailored specifically for Dexter, added another layer of risk. The killer's ultimate revelation as Dexter's biological brother, Brian Moser, brought Dexter dangerously close to exposure. The tension reached its peak when Brian kidnapped Deborah and forced Dexter to choose between his sister and his newfound connection to his biological family. Dexter's decision to kill Brian protected his secret, but left him haunted, setting a precedent for the sacrifices he would make to maintain his double life. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation represented another critical moment when Dexter's secret came under threat. As Miami Metro investigated the murders committed by the Butcher, Dexter's alter ego, Dexter found himself at the center of a case he was actively sabotaging from within. His clever manipulation of evidence and strategic framing of James Dokes bought him time, but the sheer complexity of the situation placed immense pressure on him. Each step of the investigation brought the team closer to uncovering the truth, and Dexter's ability to stay ahead felt increasingly tenuous. The culmination of this arc, with Dokes framed and subsequently killed by Lila Tournay, was a moral and emotional turning point. While Dexter succeeded in protecting his secret, the cost was enormous, leaving him with a deep sense of guilt and a lingering fear of how easily his life could have unraveled. As the series progressed, other characters began to stumble upon Dexter's secret, often with devastating consequences. Miguel Prado, a district attorney who befriended Dexter, initially saw Dexter as a kindred spirit when he discovered his dark side. Their partnership, based on a shared sense of vigilante justice, eventually fell apart as Miguel's arrogance and recklessness clashed with Dexter's strict adherence to the code. Miguel's eventual betrayal forced Dexter to eliminate him, a stark reminder that even those who seemed to understand him could not be trusted. Dexter's secret grew increasingly precarious when his sister, Deborah, discovered the truth. Walking in on Dexter, killing Travis Marshall, shattered the illusion of the brother she thought she knew. This moment was a seismic shift in the series, as Deborah, the person closest to Dexter, was now forced to grapple with the horrifying reality of his double life. Deborah's discovery not only strained their relationship, but also placed Dexter under constant scrutiny. Her internal conflict between loyalty to her brother and her duty as a police officer created a ripple effect that impacted every aspect of Dexter's life. The threat of exposure wasn't limited to individuals. Dexter's own mistakes and carelessness occasionally brought him dangerously close to being caught. The most chilling example of this was his relationship with Sergeant James Dokes, who relentlessly pursued Dexter and ultimately discovered his secret. While Dexter managed to deflect suspicion and frame Dokes, the ordeal revealed the fragility of his carefully maintained facade. Each mistake, whether it was leaving behind a trace of evidence or becoming too emotionally involved, served as a reminder that even the most meticulous plans could unravel. Throughout the series, Dexter's increasing desire for connection and normalcy made it harder for him to maintain his secret. His relationships with Rita, Lumen, Hannah, and even his children introduced vulnerabilities into his life. Each of these connections required Dexter to balance his dark urges with his need to protect and nurture those he cared about. This balancing act often placed Dexter in situations where his secret was at risk of being revealed. For example, when his son Harrison was injured due to his relationship with Hannah McKay, Dexter faced the devastating realization that his double life endangered not only himself, but also the people he loved. As Dexter's web of lies grew more complex, the consequences of his actions began to catch up with him. The series' final season brought this theme to its breaking point. As the walls closed in around him, Dexter faced the culmination of years of secrets, lies, and violence. Deborah's death, a direct result of his actions, marked the ultimate cost of his attempts to live a double life. Her loss underscored the inescapable truth that no matter how carefully Dexter tried to manage his dual existence, the collateral damage was inevitable. In the end, Dexter's greatest fear came true. The world he had worked so hard to protect crumbled around him. His attempts to maintain control, stay one step ahead, and compartmentalize his dark passenger failed to shield him from the consequences of his actions. While Dexter managed to avoid legal consequences by faking his death and disappearing, the emotional and moral toll of his double life left him a broken man, isolated and haunted by the devastation he had caused. Dexter's journey is a study in the fragility of secrets and the cost of living a life built on deception. Each close call, discovery, and confrontation served as a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always has a way of surfacing. While Dexter may have escaped unscathed in the eyes of the law, the series leaves no doubt that his ultimate punishment is the loss of everyone he cared about, and the knowledge that his darkness consumed not only himself, but also the people closest to him.